Hello and welcome to the Game Lore Archives. So far in our Diablo series, we've discussed how the universe was created, along with the high heavens and the burning hells. What we haven't discussed yet is the creation of the human world, called Sanctuary. The reason for this is it wasn't actually created along with the rest of the universe, and it isn't even in the same dimension as heaven or hell. In fact, Sanctuary's creation was a direct consequence of the eternal conflict that had already been raging for eons.
Inari was Tyrael's lieutenant, who also acted as an advisor for the Angelus Council. After fighting for countless years, Inari grew tired of witnessing death and destruction and finally concluded that the conflict itself was unjust.
As an aspect of justice, judging if things are just or not is paramount to them.
And so he believed that the eternal war must come to an end. Inari went to Tyrael and tried to make the Archangel see his point of view, but it soon became clear that Tyrael's opinion would not be changed. He believed that defeating the burning hells was morally the correct course of action for the angels to take. So Inari held his tongue and obeyed Tyrael's commands whilst planning a way to escape the fighting. He figured there must be another that was tired of the battle. He couldn't be the only angel who thought the war needed to end.
Before he could fully form a plan, Tyrael asked him and his unit to protect and attack the Pandonian fortress. During the battle, he was struck down by Lilith, daughter of the Lord of Hatred, Mephisto. When Inari awoke, he found himself bound in chains. Confused and dazed, he started talking about his plan to escape the conflict for good.
His ranting and raving struck a chord with Lilith. She too tired of the war, but her reasons differed greatly from the angels. Unlike Inari, Lilith wasn't tired of fighting the war. Her infuriation lied with how it was being led by the prime evils. They seemed to be content to use the same tactics time and time again with no lasting success.
Strangely, Inari was instantly captivated by Lilith. The demon recognised Inari's infatuation, thinking of it as a weakness and a tool that would help her manipulate the angel into helping her escape the war. So she released Inari from captivity, and the two began to conspire on how best to escape. As they planned, their relationship eventually blossomed into love, the very first time in history that an angel and demon had ever fallen in love with each other. The first part of their plan was to round up everyone who shared their views on the war. Then, this renegade band that comprised of both angels and demons infiltrated the Pandemonian fortress and stole the Eye of Anu.
When the World Stone was discovered missing, both sides believed that the other was responsible. And when they finally realised that it had just gone, the eternal conflict ended for the first time since the universe created.
The renegades teleported the World Stone into a separate pocket dimension far away from heaven and hell. They used the World Stone's power to shape a new world around it, protecting the World Stone itself under a mountain, and the mountain became known as Mount Ariat. They named this new world Sanctuary. They shielded it from detection from both the high heavens and burning hells, so they could remain hidden and safe from the internal conflict forevermore. As the renegades created this world, Inari secretly tied the World Stone's power to himself. This caused him to have immeasurable powers, strong enough to destroy any of the renegades with ease. With this newfound power, he became the ruler of Sanctuary, and his fate would be tied to the new world forevermore. The excess energy created by the World Stone also called forth an ancient dragon-like being called Trag'Oul. It is unknown if Trag'Oul was created by the excess energy, or he was just drawn to the amount of energy. Whatever the cause, he has guarded Sanctuary ever since, and his fate is directly tied to it.
As the renegades realised that they were safe, they began to settle into their new home. Lilith and Inari mated, and a union of this nature had never happened before, as interbreeding like this would have been classed as blasphemous in their old lives. Lilith then gave birth to Linarian, the very first half-demon, half-angel, a race that became known as the Nephilim. It is speculated that thousands of Nephilim were born,
if not tens of thousands.
This new Nephilim race was incredibly powerful, more so than both of the progenitor races. The Nephilim set out across Sanctuary to explore and understand the land, setting up their homes in their own way of lives, each differing from the next. However, their power was the race's downfall. Many of the renegades believed that the Nephilim's power was too great, and it would lead the high heavens and burning hells to discover Sanctuary. And if they found them, they would kill every one of their blasphemous children. This fear of being discovered led to half of the renegades call for the Nephilim to be killed. The other half of the citizens believed their children should be spared. Inari saw both sides of the argument, so asked for a small period where he could reflect for the correct course of action.
While Inari isolated himself, Lilith flew into a rage, transforming into a horrific beast. She hunted down her fellow renegades and killed all of them to protect the Nephilim. When Inarius discovered what she'd done, he was heartbroken and horrified, yet he could not bring himself to kill Lilith. Instead, he banished her to the void, an empty realm of endless darkness. Now, there are a couple of options as why Lilith committed this mass murder. Firstly was simply because she wanted to protect her own child. The second theory is that she was planning to use the Nephilim as her own private army so she could eventually overthrow heaven and hell for herself. Personally, I think it's probably a mixture of both reasons, but we'll probably never know 100% for sure.
After Lilith had been banished, Inarius attuned the World Stone to diminish the Nephilim's power over time. His son, Linarian, did not believe that it was the right thing to do, so sought out the other Nephilim to rebel. However, as strong as the Nephilim were, they could not defeat Inarius, still connected with the World Stone. He killed many of the Nephilim who tried to oppose him, so to save his life, Linarian faked his own death and fled to another realm, finding himself in Tragul's realm. This was the first time anyone found out about Tragul's existence, and he became the dragon's first disciple, changing his name to Rathma, meaning student.
Which is a name that we'll discuss in a lot more detail further down the line. However, throughout the generations, the Nephilim slowly faded into legend and slowly de-evolved into mankind. Only the surviving Nephilim of the very first generation remained, and they became known as the Ancients. And they were revered as deities by the human population, and each ancient helped shape the human settlements around them, which is where many of the classes and factions come from in modern society and the game's playable races. Many of the ancients' names has long been forgotten, however a few are still remembered today. Rathma, the first Nephilim, eventually passed Tragul's teachings on, and these humans started the priests of Rathma, more commonly known as the Necromancers. Faislagir, more commonly called Vasli, founded the Druids. Esu taught spells and laid the foundation for the mage clans that sprang up throughout Sanctuary.
Now, we cannot end an episode on Sanctuary without discussing the geography of the world itself. Sanctuary has seasons and lunar patterns very similar to Earth's. It consists of one large supercontinent surrounded by the sea and a few islands. The supercontinent is split down the middle by the ocean,
which is called the Twin Sea.
Now, there's no maps remaining from the time of the Nephilim, so we'll discuss modern day Sanctuary's map.
The west of the world is comprised of 5 separate kingdoms: Candoris, Enstead, Westmarch, Anaroch, and the Northern Steppes. These 5 kingdoms are all separate, but collectively called Western Kingdoms. We'll start from the north of the West of Kingdoms and work our way down. So at the northern tip is the Northern Steppes. Now, the Northern Steppes isn't really a kingdom per se. Mount Arrit sat in the centre of the land, surrounded by a frozen tundra. And in this harsh wasteland were multiple barbarian tribes, and they chose to set their homes up there. However, in recent years, in 1265, the World Stone was destroyed, obliterating Mount Arrit as well. This explosion changed the face of the Northern Steppes forever. Recently, it's referred to as the Dreadlands. The tip of the Western Kingdom was blasted apart, and the huge Arrit crater is in the centre of the ruins. After this explosion, the Demon Hunter Order began training to kill demonkind. At the very tip, the island Zansai broke away from the mainland also, where the Xean people now hail from.
Further south is the kingdom of Enstead. Originally Ivgorod state was spread across much of Enstead. Ivgorod was famous for its powerful monks who worship 1001 gods. The kingdom of Westmarch was founded due to the spreading of the Zakarum faith, and they attacked Ivgorod to convert their faiths. Eventually, Westmarch army marched to the far north and found themselves against the monks, and now the barbarians. Outnumbered, Westmarch lost. However, the state of Ivgorod was reduced to a single city. Since Ivgorod became a single city, Einstead has remained sparsely populated and is covered with thick woodland forests.
Keep travelling southwards and you will eventually arrive in Candoris. Candoris is largely made up of open plains, however is flanked by mountains to the east. Originally this land was nearly uninhabited until the Herodric Order built a monastery there. Traders in the area began to set up shop near the monastery until eventually a small town naturally was set up, which would eventually become known as Tristram. King Leoric settled in Tristram to spread the Zakarum faith and used the Herodric monastery as his castle and made Tristram into the capital city.
The southernmost kingdom is that of Westmarch, named after its capital city. This is the most populated kingdom in the Western Kingdoms, with it being comprised of 3 large towns as well as the capital. The population dwindles the closer to Tristram you go, giving way to more open plains. Westmarch is one of the biggest cities in all the 5 kingdoms.
Finally, if you travel east through Tristram's mountain range, you will arrive in Anaroch. Anaroch is mainly desert land, naturally protected by the mountains to its east, and the Twin Seas directly in the west. The capital of Anaroch is Lutgalain, the Jewel of the East. Lutgalain is a trading town and massively profitable, being the main trading hub between the Western Kingdoms and the Eastern Empire.
The Eastern Empire sits across the Twin Seas at the eastern end of the supercontinent. The Eastern Empire's official name is Kyrgyzstan Empire, the largest one on Sanctuary. Almost a half of East Sanctuary is part of the empire, and they've been established for generations. Because of their long rulership, the capital city has changed 4 times. Currently it's Chaldeum, sitting in the centre of the empire. Chaldeum is surrounded in desert land which covers all of northern and central Kyrgyzstan. However, as you travel south through the empire, it eventually gives way to a rainforest surrounding the town of Kurast. Kurast used to be one of the empire's older capital cities after the Zakarum faith was founded there, as were the Paladin and Crusader orders, although nowadays they are much more commonly found back in Westmarch.
The Kyrgyzstan Empire doesn't quite reach the northern tip of the continent, and the small Solskjalan Empire sits in the wilderness. Solskjalan is an untamed wilderness where the Druids live. The Druids have built ancient stone towers that dot the wilds, however, very little else is known.
To the south, the Kyrgyzstan Empire's jurisdiction ends somewhere in the forest surrounding Kurast. The further south you travel, the forest will become harder and harder to traverse, giving way to the Torajan jungles. These jungles are considered unpopulated by many, however this is where the witch doctors have chosen to live. Under these jungles is a huge hidden city called the Necropolis, its doorway hidden in the trunk of a large tree. In this hidden city, the necromancers learn the teachings of Rathma.
And finally, not part of any of this supercontinent, there are 4 small islands found to the south, in the middle of the sea. These islands are covered in lush, dense rainforests which teem with life and are the home to the Amazon race.
Now, you may have realised that we covered pretty much where every character class came from, apart from the spellcasting classes and assassin from Diablo 2. This is because they're found throughout Sanctuary far and wide.
And that's everything we have on the creation of Sanctuary and its geography. Obviously, we haven't gone into any detail of, what goes on there with the character classes. Don't worry, they'll all be getting their own episode. So thank you so much for watching. Now, obviously, these episodes are a discussion, and I would absolutely love to hear what your favourite location is in one of the Diablo games. Where's your least favourite? Personally, mine's a toss-up between the city of Westmarch and Diablo 3. I thought it was a really interesting city setting. I also loved the Karast rainforest in Diablo 2. I thought that was really cool to explore.
And I really like the Sescheron ruins and the Deadlands and all the areas surrounding Mount Ariat. Well,
Yeah.
all the old areas surrounding Mount Ariat that's no longer there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most interesting thing about the Sescheron ruins is that you see it being destroyed in a cutscene in Diablo 2.
Yeah, and then you come back to it.
And it makes
later.
it that much cooler that you come back to it.
Yeah.
And that's everything we've got. So thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe so you know in a couple of weeks when the next episode comes out. And we'll see you then.